Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the battering ram and armored elephant lines, doing a compare and contrast. Now, I've done a version of this before. However, it was in the first week after Dynasties of India released, and both the ram and especially the elephant lines have been tweaked quite a bit, with a lot of what was true at the time of that video being now incorrect or at least outdated. So let's see 4 years on where the two unit lines stand. To start side by side, the ram line is 160 wood and 75 gold, while elephants are 120 food and 95 gold, down a bit from what they were originally. At a glance, the ram is more in terms of total resources, but if we factor in castle age collection rates and consider wood's faster rate than food, elephants are actually slightly more taxing on your economy. In the mid game, it's really the food cost holding them back, but notably in the late game, the 20 extra gold is also a downside, maybe reflecting the elephant has slightly more value per unit, at least in the mind of the devs. In terms of general stats, the battering ram and armored elephant in Castle Age have very similar HP, in the high 100s to 200s range. All of these have terrible melee attack, similar-ish high pierce armor, but then negative melee armor. All of these have the same creation time at 36 seconds by the way, and the same 0.6 tiles per second movement speed, though elephants can be sped up by 10% with husbandry, or rams by garrisoning infantry, so their speeds tend to vary. The main thing to notice here is elephants are far from a reskin, and every stat has been tweaked one way or the other, which will have various impacts on specific matchups. As for upgrades, we notice a theme that siege elephants roughly split the difference between the capped ram's 300 food upgrade and the 1300 food needed to get all the way up to siege ram. Siege elephant costs 850, previously 650 for that upgrade, and against buildings, that idea of being halfway between a capped and siege ram is actually not a bad rule of thumb. For other upgrades, this is where elephants can quickly get a bit pricey, as where the battering ram line is only really upgraded by siege engineers for more bonus damage against buildings, the elephant line has husbandry for more speed, bloodlines for more HP, and the cavalry blacksmith upgrades for more attack and armor. Notably, siege engineers also increases the elephant line's bonus against buildings, which was not true at release, and again adds to the cost of fully upgrading them. The big thing worth highlighting here is the blacksmith upgrades are actually really important against villagers. Elephants fight every once in a while, and unlike a ram, can actually beat a villager head to head, even without upgrades. Though with especially attack and armor, it goes from barely winning to actually doing okay for itself. More realistically though, interacting with villagers looks like villagers defending a town center or castle, and here we have a battering ram, an armored elephant with no upgrades, and a fully upgraded castle age elephant. Letting things play out, the amount of damage the ram gets through is 450, with the unupgraded elephant doing a bit better at 540. With castle age upgrades, they get through almost double that amount of damage. It's such a common situation, and shows us one case where the elephant can have double the effectiveness of a ram. Going back to their stats though, one of the most obvious differences at a glance is their pierce armor, and raises the question of whether those differences ever matter. A lot of very high damage things like bombard cannons and cannon galleons deal melee damage, so the different pierce armor doesn't matter in that case. And all the rams and elephants have more pierce armor than a bombard tower's attack, or obviously any sort of archer unit, so usually they just do 1 damage. But there is one situation that armor comes into play, which is against trebuchets. In this one case, the trebuchet's 200 pierce attack means capped and especially siege rams have way more durability from armor, though other than that, the pierce armor differences are actually pretty non-impactful. More important are the differences in other types of armor. Melee is the other obvious one, with all of these having varying amounts of negative melee armor, which is to say that melee units and Chukanu secondary arrows etc. have an implicit extra attack bonus, but there's also hidden armor here as well. The first is ram armor, which basically means they take bonus damage from various types of gunpowder units and units that replace those, plus scorpions, ships, and villagers get +3 from sappers. The ram line generates a tiny bit of resistance to those attacks as you upgrade it, but nothing game-changing. The obvious elephant in the room, of course, is elephant armor, along with cavalry, which means all anti-cavalry and anti-elephant units, including more than just the units shown here, will get extra bonus damage against the armored and siege elephant. Each of these units' cavalry bonus is in white and the elephant bonus in yellow. Making things even more complicated though, these elephants resist up to 10 cavalry and up to 20 elephant bonus damage. The end result after the resistance comes into play gives us the green number here against siege elephants, which on the one hand can still be a lot of bonus damage the ram line isn't taking, but on the other hand it isn't as bad as it could have been, with the spear line in particular jumping out as still being a big threat. To see what this means in practice, here we have a variety of examples in Castle and Imperial Age, where we see that the Elephant's upgrades in Castle Age do very little to address this, and rams in both the mid and late game really do survive at least twice as long against the spear line. That said, I think this oversells the ram line a bit, as the elephant line can genuinely fight back. Not to exaggerate the point, but if we have them target the spear units, the elephants, at least with their upgrades, can get the spear units down to under half health, so in a pinch, a group can at least fight off a couple of units. They even deal splash damage when they're upgraded to siege elephants, dealing notable damage to a whole group at once. Unlike rams, elephants will also attack units automatically, but will favor buildings first if they're in sight, which I would say is pretty intelligent behavior. The point is they are anti-building first and foremost, but at least kind of try to act like regular units when that option isn't available. So far though, the obvious trade-off is elephants are better when villagers are involved, but much worse against anti-cavalry units, and very situationally trebuchets. There is a whole other aspect to rams though, which is the option to garrison. Not only does that increase their speed significantly, letting them outpace elephants by up to 30% or slightly more, but also work as taxis for other units. There are examples like Karambits, Shotels, and Samurai where the garrison feature isn't really for the ram, but instead benefits the infantry as a way to offset their weakness to arrows as well as position them. For that reason alone, I'm surprised rams aren't quite a bit more expensive than elephants, as they do mostly similar things, while having this whole extra dimension that's just not applicable to elephants. Of course, now we get to maybe the most important comparison, which is how they do against buildings. All of these have anti-building bonus damage, of course, with the elephants appearing to offer significantly less of that, but actually have a faster attack rate. So, real simple, which one's better at demolition? It turns out, maybe unsurprisingly, they're very similar in this regard. In terms of raw damage per hit, the ram looks like it does a lot more, but when you check damage per minute, the armored elephant and battering ram are both around 1800, while the siege elephant is roughly halfway between the capped and siege ram, as again sort of a capped ram plus. The numbers all shift a tiny bit against castles specifically, and elephants are maybe a little weaker than the ram line in that case, but not by an amount that you would probably notice. By design, with various tweaks to bonus damage, the devs have overtly tried to make elephants comparable here. The one exception is if there are multiple layers of walls, where the captain's siege ram's blast area does full damage to everything in range, instead of the siege elephant's 33%, making this one case where the ram line is quite a bit more effective. Getting into a couple of more situational matchups, both have an anti-siege bonus, with again head-to-head being pretty evenly matched against their counterparts. Against trebuchets as a pretty common use case, despite taking more damage when hit by a trebuchet, I might say the elephant has a slight edge here, if for no other reason than they move 10% faster with husbandry and can reach the trebuchet a bit sooner. On the flip side, they both take damage from most siege units, and in this case there isn't really a clear winner for me. One really major difference though is elephants do not count as siege for the purposes of conversion, so monks don't need redemption. The monks still need to be in nearly melee range to do the conversion, so they're not easy to convert, but easier for sure. On the plus side, elephants are then healed by monks and don't need to be repaired, and that's kind of a big deal, as it means they can be healed from a distance and is free, while you can keep your villagers working elsewhere instead of repairing on the front lines, costing you resources. So those are the common situations, where we have two similar units against buildings, but with a few specialties. Elephants excel against villagers, either fighting them directly or just surviving while attacking a town center, and are also generally a bit faster, whereas rams are better in most other situations, particularly against anti-cavalry units or monks, and can also tax your units around the map. That's really all you need to know, and probably a bit more. But now let's take a quick look at the various civilization bonuses and unique techs that affect elephants here as well. We'll start with Bengalis, who definitely have the most going on. First, they have a unique tech to attack 20% faster, in addition to siege engineers, for another roughly 20% against buildings. Even ignoring siege engineers for the moment, that unique tech already puts them ahead of capped ram in Castle Age, and in Imperial Age hit harder than siege rams. The other aspect of the civilization is they take 25% less bonus damage and resist conversion. The bonus damage part helps against spear units, though obviously doesn't negate that weakness, and just takes 25% off those final calculations once the armor all comes into play. The conversion resistance for its part raises the minimum conversion time by 3 and the max by 1 second, so instead of a 5 to 9 second window, they're converted in 8 to 10 seconds. The Civ also happens to get +2 attack against skirmishers, though if you can make good use of that, you might be the first person ever. Next, for Dravidians, they're missing a whole ton of upgrades, with Bloodlines, the final armor, and siege engineers missing, but have two relevant unique tags. The first, Medical Core, lets them heal 30 HP per minute, offsetting the lower HP in armor. On the one hand, it takes 7 minutes to fully heal a Siege Elephant with that, but on the other hand, it's hard to knock passive healing like this on all your units at once. The other is Woot Steel, letting them ignore armor and do 60% more damage to halberdiers, for instance. Note that the armor ignoring doesn't work against buildings. As for Gujars, they have a couple of relevant bonuses and tags, but the main one is that mounted units have 40% more bonus damage, which does apply to armored and siege elephants. At one point, this was plus 50%, which was even more bonkers, but still has a huge impact on their damage against buildings. A Castle Age armored elephant basically hits like a siege ram, and actual siege elephants in Imperial Age go up from there. Gujars are lacking the final attack and siege engineer tags, so they peak in a relative sense in Castle Age, but are just inherently very good against buildings. It's probably not the first thing that comes to mind with Gujars, or even this bonus, with camels as the obvious use case, but armored elephants are a very nice tool for Gujars. And finally, there's Hindustanis, which are just completely generic, having all the relevant text but nothing extra. So that's our bit late second go around, giving a deeper dive into the elephant versus ram lines. Obviously, they're two very similar unit lines that generally do the same things, but with notable differences as you really start to pick them apart. Big thanks to Samantha, James, Woodruff, Jared2142, Shawarma Rider, Siddhant Shah, and everyone else on Patreon for their amazing support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.